Has your boss ever showed up at your house? I live on a houseboat. Because the water starts shallow and gets deeper further away from the bank, the boat has to be moored at a distance from the bank. Obviously, a way of getting on and off the boat is required, which means a bridge of some sort. The boat is 22 meters long, so a bridge of the same width seems to make sense. Let's call it a jetty. This makes it possible to clean windows without running the risk of falling into the drink. Anyway, one Sunday afternoon, I was repairing the jetty that we had bought with the boat. It had been poorly constructed, so I was building a more robust version, that is, until I stepped on a loose plank, fell and slid down the bank towards the water, while my right leg decided to take a different direction, breaking the fibula. What a nuisance. I soaked my leg in cold water until the immediate pain was dulled, and decided to stop working on the jetty for the rest of the day. Now, I was employed by a software house or consultancy, and had been sent to a customer in Amsterdam to document a system they were using, but which had been created by a sister company in Paris. I had spent 8 months traveling back and forth between Paris and Amsterdam, learning from the Parisians about the system, translating what meager French documentation there was and basically redocumenting the whole system in English and in Dutch. I had 1 more week planned, but had a lot of work to do. Next day, I drove to the client and continued my work, dragging my right leg a bit, as it was inconveniently painful. By the end of the week I had just about finished the job, and just needed a couple of hours over the weekend to tidy up the end report, the management report and document introduction. I completed these at home with time to spare, and was scheduled to present the finished product at 11 o'clock on Monday. Got to the office, had a PA type out the last page of handwritten material, put the report and document all together, and photocopy the 1-page summary for each of the managers. I presented it all. They were very happy. At the end of the meeting I asked if they would mind if I took the rest of the day off to go to the hospital. At the hospital my leg was x-rayed. The radiologist asked in horror how long I'd been walking on it. I was given a tight elastic bandage to hold it all in place and was told to go home and stay of the leg for at least 3 weeks, but preferably 6. I called the client and said I wouldn't be there for a while. I'd finished the project, but they had requested me to stay on for a couple more weeks to teach some of their IT staff the intricacies of the system. They said there was no problem or rush, and that I could come back to do that when the leg was good again. I called my boss and told him I had to stay off the leg for a while. 2 or 3 days later he turned up in his fat Mercedes, stinking of the cigars he used as status symbols, and told me I had to sell my home and get something safer, like a house or apartment. It was not good enough that I was out of action, not making money for him, and he wanted me back in the saddle next week. I suggested he get in touch with the doctor at the hospital and ask him if I should go back to work so soon. I said, if the doctor says it's okay, I'll be back next week. He didn't check with the doctor, of course, and left, disgruntled. After a few weeks I returned to the client and spent a few weeks there, coaching their staff. When it was all done, I was treated to a leaving party and presented with a large whiteboard. I was sorry to leave that client, and they were sorry to see me go. Even though I had been to the client, and my boss had been paid for it, I still officially had another week or 2 in which I was supposed to rest my leg, so after the coaching session, I informed my boss I needed to rest it for another week or so, as I had been overdoing it in the interests of the client. He wasn't happy, but couldn't actually make me go against the doctor's orders. At the time, at the request of my wife, I had been growing my hair and wearing it in a short ponytail. Halfway through the first week of resting and healing the leg, he called again with the message that this wasn't good enough and he wanted me in the office for a serious talk. A friend of mine had just been invited to join a new consultancy startup and asked if I'd be interested. I was interviewed and invited to join the startup at a higher salary. I accepted and a date was agreed upon. I was supposed to give my current boss a month's notice, but I decided I would just give a week's notice and resign, perhaps losing the last month's salary, but I was fed up with the situation and his snotty attitude and constant push for me to sell my home. I turned up for the serious talk on the appointed day, still limping. First thing he said was, you'll have to get your hair cut, and have you given any thought to getting rid of your boat and buying a real home? I told him I wouldn't cut my hair without consulting my wife, nor would I consider selling my home. I was paid by him to work, and I had just left an extremely happy client, so he really had nothing to complain about. He said, again, I should sell the boat and get an apartment, because he would then have more assurance that I wouldn't break something and have to stay off work as that cost him too much money. I stayed polite but firm and told him I would not sell the boat, but I might consider cutting my hair after consultation with my wife. This defiance ruffled his controlling nature and, stupidly, he reacted with, then we have a problem. He told me he thought I ought to leave the company. If I preferred, he would give me a month's notice, but I didn't need to come back to the office again. I looked hesitant, I suppose, because then he offered me a large cash payment on top of that. So I accepted. I didn't have to give notice, or go back to the office, and I got a chunk of money as well. The following Monday, I went to my new place of employment, much closer to home and with a new, intelligent boss who was very easy to get along with.